It has been quite some time since I've sat down and done a Game Boy mod, and that's mostly because there hasn't been a great deal of interesting things that have come out, at least from my perspective, but Nick from Boxy Pixel has recently just brought out this. A fully metal Game Boy Advance covered by a pane of glass. This has to be one of the most stunning Game Boy mods I have ever seen. Nick is a pioneer in this space. He has just built some of the most fantastic things that I've seen being done. Look at this shell. There are three sort of main key parts to this build. There's going to be the shell, the screen, and the battery. Here's the screen and the battery. This screen is from High Speedo. And one of the best parts about this screen mod is that there is no soldering required. There are a few pads that you can solder to if you want to have a physical brightness and color sort of selection option, but you can just use the included touchpads if you wish. And then this battery is completely assembled already. And another thing which is just so innovative with Nick and all of the stuff that he does is that he's made this sort of battery chamber here which goes into the shell, which allows you to use either AA batteries or the rechargeable battery pack, and you can just drop in and interchange the two, which is just phenomenal. Nick is just so good at doing this. So I'm going to put this whole thing together, and honestly, this is one of the most straightforward mods that I have ever seen. This video has been sponsored by PCBWay, your one-stop solution for all of your DIY needs. Not only do they offer a printing service for every type of PCB that you can possibly imagine, they also do 3D printing, CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, and injection molding. I recently used their services to repair this old Game Boy kiosk. They made new brackets for me to help bring it back to its former glory. Check out PCBWay in the description below. So from an original Game Boy, you're going to need two parts. You're going to need the motherboard and the little doohickey thing here, this shield. That is going to get sat straight into the shell, and we're just going to get started with this. So there's a few different sizes of screws. I'll make sure to include Nick's very in-detail tutorial to build this yourself if you so wish. This is going to be more of a sort of a me having a go type thing. And then we can also install this tiny little screw here. That's going to go into this hole, and I'll show you what this is for. It might be worth, with this, by the way, adding some Loctite to make sure that it doesn't sort of move around. But yeah, so that goes through there, like so. And then this is the battery cover. Now, this is the sort of innovation that I'm talking about with Nick. So it slides in like this. Now this, by the way, is an early version of this shell. The ones that are actually going to be sold aren't going to have all of these scratches, and it will have a slightly different finish. There's also a brass version, and then you have anodized aluminium versions as well, which are going to be coming in different colors. And this is $109, and then the brass version is $170. So that is quite expensive. You're also going to need to buy his little pieces here, the plastic sort of components, which come in at $12. And then you can use the original buttons, or you can buy these ones here, which are going to be about $23 to $27 depending on which material. But I'm going to use the metal ones, but obviously some people prefer the plastic ones as well. And then the key part of this mod is this glass piece here. Now, I do believe in the future, Nick wants to have one full piece with the screen that's going to be kind of laminated to the glass. But for now, it is going to have just a tiny little gap. But it's not really that noticeable. So this is not very expensive at all. It's only $8. And then there's also a metal one, which is $7. So you do have lots of options to make this be slightly more affordable, but obviously this is a very expensive mod. But then again, it's a premium mod. What can you expect? But this is the sort of innovation that you get with Boxy Pixel. So this is like the most satisfying thing ever. And then if you just take a look at the tiny little details, so where the USB-C from the battery comes out here, so it just sort of corrects and aligns that so that it's perfectly in line there for when you plug in your cable. I mean, it's those sorts of things that just make Nick so brilliant. So let's get to work. So we've put in the screw, we've put in the shield. Next up, we're gonna come over to this piece here, and we're gonna fit the glass front. So that is just gonna look absolutely stunning. I do like the brass version as well, but I think just the plain raw aluminium one just makes this look kind of, I don't know. I like the raw one. I'm a big sucker for the sort of the raw metal look. I think that looks fantastic. I do like the brass as well. So I'm just gonna give this a clean. I do think that this is gonna be one of the biggest kind of issues with this mod, is gonna be the dust and the sort of fingerprints. So now we can remove the adhesive protector here, and there's one on the other side as well. And we can set that down onto the shell. And that is it, perfectly aligned right there. Now I feel like I'm gonna be wiping this all throughout the video. There's a tiny little bit of print as well on the glass, which is for the start and select, and then a black sort of rim that goes all the way around, which is to just cover up the adhesive. So if there is an anodized black version, that is obviously going to be a lot less visible, but with the aluminium version, just the plain one, you can see that a little bit more. So let's flip this over. I might have to set that down, which is going to make the video look a little bit crap, but I don't want to scratch it. So next up, we're going to be installing the screen bracket, which is this piece here. This is 3D printed, so that just gets sat into place like that. And then there's 4 screws that we need to put in. So just be mindful of the different sizes of screws. There are a few different ones. That will be very clearly laid out in Nick's written tutorial, which is definitely going to be worth reading if you're planning on doing this yourself. But if you are pretty well versed with mods, it'll all be very self-explanatory indeed, because this is just a very straightforward little mod, and I can't believe how far these mods have come, that we can just do this with 0 soldering and have something that is going to look this amazing. So there we go, that is the bracket installed. Again, it's sort of going to have a bit of a black border to it, and that's going to get mostly covered up by the screen, which is going to drop into place like that, and my camera is going to have a very hard time focusing, so I apologize in advance. Right, what we're going to do is peel off the adhesive backing of the screen. There's 2, there's one on the top and one on the bottom. And then you've got these 2 little antennas which are coming off. These are the touch sensors. So I think I'm actually going to sack off the color one, because I'm not a big fan of that at all, but the brightness one we do need, which I believe is this bottom one here. So I'm actually going to just be folding this color one down, and it's covered currently in a sort of a protective plastic sheet, which will stop it from having any of the conductivity, hopefully. So I'm now going to just peel off the protector on this one like that, and then I'm going to stick that down right around here, which, as you can see on Nick's plastic piece, you probably can't see actually, there's a bit of a recess, so that's going to just not get in the way there at all. So let's now set this down. So it's probably best that you get this little corner under first, and then you can just slot that down like that. Look at that. Oh my goodness me. Right, and then we can give all of that a little wipe, and that will also just press that glass screen into place. Oh my word. Nick has just done such a good job here. Now, there are actually 2 options of these screens. You've also got one which is completely black, which doesn't have the logo at all, but I really like seeing the Game Boy Advance logo there. Look at that, wow. Now, the screen mod comes with 2 different ribbons. That is going to be for the different size connections that you have up here for the ribbon cable of the screen. So this is the 40-pin version, meaning we can sack off the thinner one, and there we have the thicker version. So this is a slightly fiddly process. We need to shove the ribbon under here and then sort of bring it out through the top and then we can connect the ribbon cable to the screen. There we go. And we can set in the buttons. And then finally, you can connect the motherboard to the ribbon cable here. So I'm gonna go ahead and lock that down. And then you can sort of hinge and angle everything into place. Obviously the speaker needs to just be wiggled around a bit. Yeah, so make sure everything's sort of pressing properly. Just give everything a little press and a wiggle and a jiggle. And then once it's all set in place and you're happy with that, you can tighten these screws down. So next up, we're going to be installing the battery compartment piece. So that is going to go in like that. There we go. And there's a couple of screws that just hold that down into place. Now, if you want to use AA's, you need to make sure you take out the battery contact from the shell, the old shell of the Game Boy that you've removed the motherboard from, and then that can get slot into place in there. I haven't actually got one of those because to be completely transparent, Nick sent me everything and I haven't actually got one of those, but I'm just instead going to use a small piece of cardboard. So once that is in, we can put in all of the buttons. So you can use these from your original Game Boy, or you can buy some new ones. I'm going to be putting in these black ones here because I think they're going to look really smart with all of the little black accents that this Game Boy is going to have. They're a little bit of a fiddle. You got to sort of get that spring in the right place. There we go. And they get held down properly with the back shell. So we're also going to need the power button. So take that out and you can pop that down into the shell. There we go. Right, and now for the final part, we can set the back down, and everything is just gonna need a tiny little wiggle. And that's it. Did you see the little tiny wiggle? There we go, look at that, everything is in. Now before I screw it down, I'm just gonna pop in the battery, install the proper battery connector there, because that will just help push it into the contacts. But a bit of cardboard is perfectly fine. No, it's not. Don't do that. There we have it. And then we can slide the battery cover over the top of that. You might want to put some Kapton tape on top of the battery contacts and stuff to make sure that it doesn't short. And then we can flip it over and boom. Look at that. Now, I should still have full access to the touch connector there. And then there's also little things you can do, like you can hold it down and it will add a bit of a sort of a pixel effect on the screen. This has been out for a long time now, so that's nothing new. I like it just being on the completely plain one, but there's several different levels of brightness that you can have there. And there we go. Just look at that, and how straightforward was this build. It's really hard to believe how far this has all come, that you can just chuck something like this together in literally less than an hour with virtually no real experience required. Just a little bit of confidence and willpower. So everything gets screwed together. Now in these early mods from Nick, the shells and the tolerances and all of the screw holes and everything sort of unevenly sort of went together, and sometimes it wasn't that seamless and you'd have to loosen a screw on one corner to get the other one to go down or whatever. Now that is not the case at all. These screws are all thoroughly tightened and everything presses beautifully. Just look at that. Let's give it one quick wipe and we'll never have to do it again for the next 10 seconds, and then we're gonna have to do it again. Just Look at that. I really do hope that there's enough interest in this mod so that Nick can justify getting one sort of whole sheet made so that you don't have that little lip, but you obviously don't really see that. And it just looks like one big long glass piece. And there's lots of tiny little details, like even the A and B. And then you've also got a series of little lines to show which way the volume works. Yeah, just look at that. You've got the on-off as well. It is just absolutely beautiful. Seriously, what a stunning thing. USB-C rechargeable. Let's see how well that all goes in. Absolutely fine. And there's a small little hole just there so that you can actually see when it's charging or when it's low on battery. What? Nick, you beast. So let's test that all the buttons work with this official Nintendo test cartridge. Let's plug this in. There we go. And that looks perfectly fine. And let's turn it on. And if the L and R buttons work, it will change its aspect ratio. And then we can actually go through and test all of the buttons. Start. Oh no, that's select, start. So now it's telling me to do like a bunch of combinations to make sure that everything works together, which as you can see, it does. And then you get through to the end and you have a little Mario face. All of the buttons work. That is brilliant. Now I can finally watch my SpongeBob SquarePants movie with one big sort of pane of glass along the front of my Game Boy. And that really is true happiness, other than the fact that it didn't work. Just look at that IPS screen. It is an absolute beast. Now, this comes in at nearly $300 and a little bit more once you then add the actual cost of the Game Boy Advance itself and all of the shipping, and then you can spend nearly $400 if you get the brass version. So this is obviously a very expensive thing, but it is so simple to put together. You are pretty much guaranteed to be able to do it, even with no experience whatsoever. And then you have something as beautiful and as unique as this. And this is quite possibly the last Game Boy mod you're ever gonna need to do. I mean, look at the screen, it's perfect. If you ever have any issues with the battery mod, well, that can just come out. You can just buy another one of those and replace that. And these are, you know, gonna be made forever because they're so incredibly useful. But if you don't want to use that, you can just use your AA's, or you can sort of do this mod in installments, you know, buy everything else and then purchase your rechargeable battery, which is gonna save you an extra $40 to begin with, and then you can buy that at a later stage. But it's just so handy to be able to have the option to add your AA's if you are out and about and your battery dies and you desperately want to watch more SpongeBob movie. Oh, he's given me an extra one. That's very handy. Thanks, Nick. Here is what the aluminium top looks like if you just want to have it be a completely solid metal version. That also looks sweet. Damn, that also does look really sweet. Could you do something where you could have you could change between the two? You probably could. Could be a bit of a fiddle, but look at that. Just get some clunky Velcro and stick it down and then have your buttons be near enough unpressable. I just love what Nick's doing. It's absolutely fantastic. Speaking of loving what my friends are doing, my friend Brandon has come out with one of the coolest products I have ever seen. This is a completely recycled Game Boy stand using plastic that has been sourced from waste. And look at how cool that is. So this is universal so that you can use it with pretty much any device. And as you can see, it works perfectly well with the Boxy Pixel aluminium Game Boy. And you can literally swap it out with your phone, with your lens cap. The Wide Boy works absolutely perfectly. So it takes 4 cartridges, 2 AA's, and your Game Boy, or you can swap it out and have a couple of extra cartridges as well. And look at that, that sits on your desk. And there's also this one, which is made from ocean waste, and there's going to be some other colors available later. I'll leave a link to Brandon's website, Game Nook, in the description below. What a cool thing, what a lovely little thing as well to be doing in the industry, something that really actually does make a difference. So thank you all very much for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Goodbye.